I mean, before I had the opportunity to study philosophy, I knew that I was interested in it. I knew that I was interested in, I guess, big ideas and sort of the kind of synthesis and clarity and thinking about whether God exists and stuff like that. So even as a secondary school student, I read philosophy and was interested in philosophy. What's particularly interesting for me about consciousness is that it is simultaneously completely familiar, right? I mean, when I talk about consciousness, I don't mean anything sort of surprising or arcane. I just mean, conscious sensation, conscious thought, like pains and color perceptions and so on. So it's completely familiar, but it's also, with just a little bit of sort of thought about it, completely mysterious. It's very, very hard to understand how consciousness happens. It's particularly hard to understand sort of now in the 21st century, when a general worldview for most people is broadly physicalistic, right? So if you ask the question, how does pain, for example, the sensation of pain or the feelings of being in love or color perception, how do those things happen in the brain? That's a particularly baffling way of putting the question. But even from a more traditional sort of non-physicalist perspective, it's still very surprising. It's not at all clear how consciousness works, what kind of thing it is. My own view is that it's a very difficult problem, and it's a very interdisciplinary problem. It's a problem that will require the contributions of not just philosophers, but also neuroscientists and experimental psychologists and linguists and computer scientists and so on. It's a big problem with many aspects. And my view is that it's the kind of problem that in the end will be solved empirically. Like, what ultimately down the road you need a good testable, empirical, scientific theory of how consciousness arises. But because it's such a difficult problem, the road towards that theory involves a lot of conceptual groundwork. It involves a lot of thinking about what would count as such a theory and what are the parameters within which such a theory could only be verifiable and things like that. So I feel like I've made some progress, at least to my own satisfaction, in those terms, but I don't know the answer to how consciousness arises from the brain. So zombies are hypothetical philosophical thought experiments where you suppose that consciousness is non-physical, you suppose that it can be subtracted from the brain, leaving the brain causally intact, and you ask yourself if that's a coherent possibility. So the question is, could zombies, as I've just characterized them, exist?
So
particularly at university, it's more important to follow the things that interest you. I mean, this is the time at which you have the opportunity to explore the things that interest you and to follow those passions instead of being too calculating about what you think will be a saleable, marketable skill or something like that. And I think if you're going to do that, you might as well do it well. You might as well put some effort into it and really get as deeply into it as you can because then it's more satisfying, then it's more enjoyable.
So
finding stuff out, knowing more about the universe, understanding things more deeply and more fully is itself a way of producing a better planet, and I think it's easy to underestimate the profundity of that, right? I mean, I really think that's as important as a better computer chip or a better poem, right? I mean, these are all things which are important.